Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Community Development, Housing, and General Government Committee meeting. Today, we have 7 consent items as well as 7 general agenda items. And I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tempore Adams.
Here.
Councilmember Scipio.
Present.
Councilmember Mundy.
Present.
And Councilmember Clark.
Here.
We will, as you know, we have a consent agenda, and committee and council members can ask for items to be pulled. Councilmember Scipio has already asked for C5. Are there any other items on the consent agenda to be pulled?
Move approval of the balance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Scipio. And would you please vote? And the motion passes. Thank you very much. The clerk calls C5, please.
Item C5, information on the climate pollution reduction grants.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, other members of the committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor.
Item C5, information on the climate pollution reduction grant. Staff has put together a package for this particular grant. However, we were not chosen for the next phase of the grant process at this time. It is staff's intention to continue looking for other situations that would be feasible for us, and we will try again. That is where we're at currently.
Councilmember Scipio.
Mr. Taylor, you know, I'm always so happy to know we're going after money. So I just, what'd you say, Ms. Taylor?
Let me repeat. We did pursue this one, but we were not successful with moving to the next phase.
Are we going to try again?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. That's
Certainly
all
will.
that matters. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Just take a page from choice. Three is the charm, okay?
Thank you.
May I have this is for information only.
Information.
All right, moving on to the general agenda. Would the clerk please call the first item?
Item G1, an ordinance amending Chapter 10 of the Unified Development Ordinances to revise the membership structure of the Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission.
And Mr. Murphy will be communicating with us. Heather is not here.
That's right. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee, other members of City Council. Just a little bit of a recap. Of course, the materials are still included in your packet. This was continued from your April committee meeting. This comes out of some discussions with the manager's office back in the spring of 2022. In the fall of 2022, we brought an item to this committee looking at ways that we can increase diversity on the HRC. At that time, we put forth an item saying we thought the best course of action would be to remove 2 of the categorical seats that the city council appoints, and to make those at large. That would keep 2 categorical seats for the city, the historic overlay and the historic district appointees, and that would be similar to what the county has as far as they have a local historic landmark appointee and a appointee for an architect. Changing to the 3, the 2 appointee and the 2 categorical and the 3 at large allows for more opportunity for diversity on the HRC. When we brought that item to committee in April, there was some discussion about that, and of course, as the agenda was packed, we continued to this month to allow for further discussion. We did send out an email asking for any questions. We didn't have any questions that were actually sent to us, but we did have a couple discussions with a couple of council members. With that, our recommendation is still as it is in your materials, that we have the text amendment put forward to the full council, removing the 2 categorical appointments and going to a 2 categorical and 3 at large. And with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Any comments or questions? Councilmember Clark, then Councilmember Larson.
Okay. We currently have 2 at large.
We currently have 4 categorical, and only 1 at large that the city appoints.
And you're recommending what?
We are recommending 2 categorical and 3 at large,
Moving 2 over.
moving 2 categorical, 2 at large.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Councilmember Larson?
I expressed at the time this was first presented that the category positions that are being removed directly affect the quality of the commission and its authority to act responsibly in the certificates of appropriateness and the research. They come out of the history of historic resources actually being composed of 2 different commissions, one being a Historic Districts Commission, which goes back to 1948, and then a Historic Properties Commission. When the 2 were combined, there was some concern that perhaps historic districts, which require more attention and more authenticity, would be diminished in the process. And to protect that, several qualified positions were established, one being archaeology, historic preservationist, historic architectural positions, and research positions that assured quality of control as these go forward. I would like to submit an alternate position at this point, that the removal of these qualifying individuals for designated positions is not going to guarantee the diversity that we're looking for. There's no question in my mind that African-American presence in the architecture and building out of Winston-Salem over the last several hundred years has been an important part of this cultural history of Winston-Salem and should be recognized and shouldn't have a place at the table. And I'm suggesting that we, in fact, take that at-large position and designate that as an African-American heritage position. Some people would tell me that, well, there's no buildings left. That, in fact, African-American presence has been diminished over the years by highway projects and urban renewal and what have you. And I would contend that that's not necessarily the case, that a lot of what preservation is concerned about these days is what is called cultural continuity, which is basically what has happened in the landscape of a neighborhood or a city, that it deals with historical aspects of that city. And certainly the cultural continuity is an important part of our history. It's manifested in programming, it's manifested in research, it's manifested in all kinds of activities. And if African-American history is important to us, we ought to designate and be intentional about what we create and create a spot that gives a direct voice that represents the 35 to 40% presence in the landscape of this particular population that's been with us ever since the towns were established. So my recommendation, Madam Chairman, would be to take the at-large position and convert it specifically to make it an African-American heritage slot, leaving the quality and the expertise that's available currently on the commission untouched.
I have an amendment or substitute motion. Is that what you're making?
Yes,
But you
Madam-
can't. You're not on the,
I can't make any motions.
you can't.
Yeah.
Councilmember McIntosh, then Councilmember Scipio.
So I'm not going to speak to that motion. I'm not going to speak to Councilmember Larson's motion, but just in general, I think it's a good move to get away from as much professional technical requirements for the commission. And this commission's been established for many, many years. I've attended many, many of the meetings. The expertise level of staff and the remaining required positions, I think, gives us plenty of authenticity and ability to deal with properties on a technical sense. So I approve of getting our representation on this more spread out amongst the public. I don't know what kind of an issue it will be finding folks who are qualified, as Councilmember Larson is looking for, whether those people exist in the community and will continue to exist. So that could well kind of paint us in a corner if we can't find that particular technical skill locally.
Councilmember Scipio.
Yes, when we are going to speak to diversity in this community and representation, then we can't just leave it up to chance. 2 at-large seats does not mean diversity. So I am certainly in favor of designating at least one of the at-large positions for an African-American representative on this commission. Otherwise, it probably would not happen. And being intentional about having voices on committees and boards is what our community had to do in the early 90s for our school board and for our county commissioners. When people vote, we only got non-African Americans and no representation on those boards. So it's important, if we're going to speak and believe we're going to show diversity in the operations of the city, that we are intentional about making that happen. So I would make a motion to add one of the at-large positions as an African American representative for
Madam
this
Chair,
commission.
Yes, city attorney.
excuse me. I would suggest that we rephrase that and say a representative who has a background in African-American history, as opposed to designating an African-American.
Madam City Attorney, a background in African-American history doesn't necessarily mean there's a voice on this committee from an African-American resident.
I understand the concern, but we have to make sure we are lawful in the designation, and I think that is
Okay.
closer to what is lawful.
Councilmember Clark, Councilmember Scipio has made a motion.
Yes, but we
Well, I'm
didn't.
not sure what the motion is. That could be
Yeah.
Now-
substitute, or is it addition to? I'm going to suggest we send it back to staff and tell them to combine everything. Staff's recommending doing away with making 2 more at-large, and I don't know if she's suggesting that and then taking one of the 3 at-large, or simply taking the 1 at-large now. So I'm still not sure we know what we're voting on.
If I could just offer a comment, one of the reasons why the recommendation is the way that the recommendation is to remove 2 of the categorical seats, is anytime you categorize an appointment, you're limiting the pool of folks that meet the criteria. So if if you start off with, let's just suppose we have a mythical population of 100 folks in our community, and we come up with a categorical appointment, and that categorical appointment automatically eliminates 60 of those folks, then your pool's down to 40, and then you're pulling from that pool. So any categories you have immediately eliminates your pool based on what the category is. Obviously, it's within the purview of the council to do whatever the council wants as far as setting policy, but it's also the council's ability to appoint the representatives on the commission, especially the ones that you control. You have 5 seats. If you further limit your pool by having a category specifically related to something, you're reducing your pool. Staff feels like having 3 at-large seats provides a greater ability to have more diversity on the committee because you're not limiting your pool. At that point, your pool is limited to the 240,000 plus or minus citizens of the city of Winston-Salem who may be interested. And then ultimately, the committee appointments come before this board. So again, I believe there are ways that the council as a whole can shape the makeup of the seats that council controls. You have 5 seats, 2 of which would be categorical if this were to be approved, 3 would be at large. If we come back and keep it as is, you have 4 categorical seats and 1 at large. If you do something where it's a mix and match, then perhaps you'll come back with 3 and 2. But that's why staff's recommendation is as it is to keep it as wide open as possible so we don't limit our pool of potential applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I asked the staff to look into this, And I'm quite satisfied with what they did. You know, the one thing that sometimes we forget is they said, if you read the dates in the report, this goes back to about 1948. I'm sure nobody looked like me was anywhere. We have an opportunity. If you look at the graph and the chart that was included in the material, Durham is the only city of our size or bigger that has a categorical, professional categories. None of the other cities, Asheville, Charlotte Historic, Charlotte Mech, Greensboro, Guilford, Raleigh, Wilmington. I think, and I'll hear some more comments and then we're going to move on because we got a long agenda. I think what we need to do is, again, allow the expertise of the staff, of the people that we trust to do the job. The planning board even approved it. And as we all know, if we're not satisfied with whatever it is, we can change it. At any time, y'all, we can pull stop. But to just, say, well, no, maybe this won't work. Let's try it the way that the material was presented to us and move forward. And in a year or whatever, when these dates of appointments or whatever come up, then we can respond accordingly at that time. We can also let the community know what it is that we're looking for or trying to do at that point, even more in depth. And that's what I think. I think we move this ship on down the road. Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, my concern remains one of that this is not a reflection of the quality of staff that we have. I assume that we will maintain a high level of professionalism on our staff. Part of the intent of a commission, or such as the Historic Resources Commission, is in fact to protect the quality of the staff and to protect the decision-making that the staff has. They act as a safeguard and as a backup and as a quality control on the staff, as well as providing them protection and credibility. And I think when we start taking the expertise off this commission, we begin to remove some of the resources that are available to staff to make solid decisions and to make them in good confidence that they will be protected by this commission. So that's one of the reasons why but most importantly, if we're serious about trying to add diversity, it can be simply done by taking a position that currently is not filled by an African American and designating it and guaranteeing that we have that voice present on the commission. And that seems to be the goal that we're trying to establish here. Otherwise, we're going to have more at-large positions, and we're still going to be faced with the problem of not having the diversity that we're asking for. So the recommendation that I'm coming up with is, if we're serious about having a third of our population, a fourth of our population represented on this commission, go ahead and establish an African-American voice on it. It's going to be important in the years ahead. And there's plenty of talent out there to deal with that. As the city attorney says, we just need somebody with African-American heritage, experience, or expertise. And I'm sure they can be fine. We've discussed several, I can give you several names immediately that come to my mind that would be available to fill that slot. And then we're guaranteed of doing, I think, exactly what we want to do without trying to revisit this thing or remanage it in the years ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Larson. Councilmember Scipio had a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second for that motion? The motion dies. Councilmember Mundy.
I don't have an opinion so much on the professional piece of the specific assignments, but I do agree with Councilmember Larson that we do need to be intentional in this and many other things, as Mayor Pro Tem Adams has stated at almost every meeting that we've had since I've taken office. We must be intentional about representing African Americans. I don't know why you're singing a different song today, but at any rate, we took a lot of heat when we let those 3 buildings go the last time. So I think we do need to be intentional, and we need to have one spot at least reserved for a representative who can speak to African American culture. So I want to raise that point.
Thank you, Councilmember Monday. One more thing I want to say, and I'm not finished yet, but we're going to tie this up in a minute. It seemed like when I first started talking about this, I got some pushback from my peers that didn't think I needed to touch this. And now somebody wants to tell me that, we need to be intentional. Well, sometimes intentional, when it's trying to change something for the better, to be more inclusive, the ones of us or others that were never included, we see this in a different light. Councilmember McIntosh, and then Councilmember Clark.
Very quickly, part of the responsibility of being on this council is to recruit people for our boards and commissions. We have 4 African Americans on this council. They should be out recruiting people for this commission. So I'll just leave it at that.
Councilmember Clark.
I'm willing to try something and trust it, so I'll make a motion that we approve the staff recommendation.
Can I get a second? I second the motion.
Can I comment?
Councilmember Clark.
The city council in the end approves the nominees.
Correct.
The mayor put together. So we'll have our opportunity.
Correct.
And I have 100% faith that we will like who is picked. Now, this is a very different committee than a lot of committees we have. It's very, very technical. Not everybody's going to want to be on it, but I think we can find some folks that do.
I have a motion and a second. City Clerk, would you please call for the vote? And she's still.
It didn't come up.
Did you vote yes or no?
No,
No, you didn't vote, or did you vote?
no.
Okay. Okay.
The motion is 2-2, and we can forward this on to council for Monday for the council to vote. Is that correct?
Monday, general agenda, yes.
Yes, general agenda. Thank you very much. Mr. Murphy?
I believe it'll be
Right.
June.
June for public hearing.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you. Next item, City Clerk, please.
Item G2, an ordinance to amend miscellaneous sections of the Unified Development Ordinances to provide minor, non-substantive changes and clarifications.
Mr. Smotherman.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, Vice Chair Scipio, and members of council. I'm here to do a brief presentation on our proposal to amend 5 chapters in the UDO for miscellaneous non-substantive changes. And what I mean by that is every 3 or 4 years, the staff will present non-substantive changes, keep the UDO up to date, and ensure that there's proper clarity in the ordinance. These changes are often in response to unintentional omissions or inconsistencies resulting from previous UDO amendments and issues related to ordinance enforcement. And these amendments do not change the intent of the original regulations. UDO CC 23 includes 2 minor changes to zoning map amendment processes in Chapter 3. 1 minor change to the establishment of neighborhood conservation overlay districts, Chapter 4, corrects an omission in the principal use table and revises specific standards for 2 uses in Chapter 5, reserves an nonconforming subsection Chapter 9, and revises definitions in Chapter 11. In Chapter 3, one of the zoning map amendment sections is being revised so that the neighborhood outreach summaries must now include all meeting outcomes, not just that they sent out notices and who all received them. And also the requirement for a pre-application conference for special use district limited districts has been removed because it hasn't been used in a long time. For the Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, this was something that came from the General Assembly. If any standard in a proposed NCO is determined to constitute a downzoning, then it shall require support from 100% of the property owners that are affected. The principal use table in Chapter 5, we just added a reference to the use-specific standard that prohibits electronic sweepstakes operation. And then in the use-specific standards of Chapter 5, we've got 3 minor revisions to planned residential developments. The first is that we removed 3-acre minimum site sizes for GMA 3 and GMA 4. We also removed a 5-acre minimum site size for multiple single-family dwellings on the same zoning lot. You may say, why are you doing that? It's because we recently approved cottage courts, which has no minimum. And so if they have no minimum, I felt like it would be best not to have minimums on here. And then the third change is to substitute a 20-foot wide type 1 buffer yard around the property perimeter outside of the PRD, which is consistent with other buffer yard standards. When we went to UDO clear code, there were no more 30-foot wide buffers. You went from 20 to 40. And then finally, for private swimming pools as a use all of its own, the fencing around these swimming pools shall meet the requirements of the North Carolina Building Code. In nonconformities, Chapter 9, we reserved the special use parking requirement as all the affected uses, which were electronic sweepstakes operation, and restaurants have been removed by previous amendments. And then in Chapter 11, we revised 11 definitions to replace unintentional omissions, duplicate definitions, and unnecessary references. Planning Board had a hearing on April the 13th. There were no speakers in support or opposition, and the Planning Board recommended approval by a 6-2 vote.
Thank you, Mr. Smotherman. Any questions or comments from the committee or council? May I have a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
It has been moved and properly seconded by Councilmember Mundy, Councilmember Scipio. May we have the vote, please? And the motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Item G3, request to set the date for the public hearing regarding the eligibility of the Cone Gray House for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Ms. McCullough, good to see you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, council members. Again, we're here tonight just to set the public hearing date, but I can answer any questions, and we'll make a full presentation at your council meeting unless you want that this afternoon. This is National Register, which is the honorary, no financial ties related to this designation.
Any comments, questions from the committee?
You
Councilmember
presented this
Clark.
house a couple weeks ago.
You saw this house because it was designated a local historic landmark.
Yes.
This is now going through the National
Yeah.
Register process, which is the federal,
Yes, that's what I thought. Same
Yeah.
house. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you.
same house.
We good? All right.
Move approved.
Do we need to approve this or, yeah?
Set the date, yep.
Oh, to set the date, okay. Councilmember Clark has made the motion. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Councilmember Scipio has seconded. May we have a vote, please? And the motion passes. Thank you so much. Next item, please.
Item G4, resolution establishing action steps for implementation of sustainability goals.
Mr. Taylor, you get to sit in the hot seat tonight.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to say good evening to everyone again. I'm going to click on this. I'll touch the CARF, followed by the Exhibit A, and give some comments on the staff recommendation. So I'm here to discuss a resolution submitted by the Community Sustainability Program Committee, and they're seeking approval for a resolution establishing action steps for implementation of sustainable goals. So the resolution is intended to provide recommendations for those specific steps so that we could reach our goal of 100% clean renewable energy by 2050. There is some supporting documentation that's added to this presentation, and I'm sure all of you have had a chance to review the package, but I would like to take just a moment to touch those things that were recommendations or reasons for the committee's request for this particular resolution. Inside that Exhibit A, they mentioned several things, one being the fact that our energy emissions have gone down only 0.81%. If you look at the information there, that's 2021, relative to our baseline in 2008. So that was one of the reasons. And I've got Mr. Smith here in case we get really technical. He's really the guru with this information. Also, the other thing that was mentioned was the fact that sustainable solutions need to be equity-centered. Staff, along with the committee, both agree on this, that we have to consider those individuals that are more negatively impacted by our current environmental conditions, and we still have a commitment to working in those particular areas. Also, number 3, the analysis of sustainability approaches of comparable cities. So as you've gone through the information, you saw that there were cities that chose to seek out consultants. There was also a city that chose not to seek out a consultant, but form an ad hoc committee that would help. I would like to mention that several of those particular locations may not have had the same level of support that we have on staff, and that is our energy manager. So the 4th one is the recommendation providing some particular individuals that may be able to help if there was a consulting process. I would like to mention, because of the cost that would be associated with an agenda of this type, this would have to call for an RFP and also a competitive bidding process. So finally, as the resolution was recommended, staff does not support the recommendation of the committee. And I won't just leave it there. I will give you some reasons as to why the staff does not support the recommendation. Not supporting the recommendation does not mean that staff does not support reaching the sustainable goals. However, we currently have an energy manager on staff. He's here tonight, Mr. Lindsey Smith, who works in the position in the Office of Sustainability. He is capable and has done this in the past to perform the same recommendations that are asked to be done by a consultant. While staff has always, and I repeat always, sought recommendations for energy efficiency, the truth of the matter is there are many reasons why sometimes we're not able to do that. And the main one that I'll mention tonight is the lack of resources. And so it takes resources, and even if a consultant is chosen, it will still require resources to carry out the plan. I would like to mention that the idea of bringing in an energy consulting company is not new to staff. In fact, we've done this in the past. We have brought individuals in to look at our various facilities, but I will share with you, they are more attracted to situations that will provide a greater payback. So how that works, they come in, they find a facility, they say you can gain X amount of dollars in savings. They actually fund that project up front. The city is responsible for returning the investment in savings back to compensate them for the project. We have done that here. We have sought out performance contractors, and we have had difficulty getting some to come on board because some of the facilities that they thought we actually had ownership of were not city facilities. I will share with you that about 80% of our energy consumption comes from the utilities function, and we all know that that's got to take place. I will share with you that utilities has done a great job of planning some things that will reduce our energy consumption in the future. I will name a couple that have already been done. There was a situation at the Idols facility where we've actually put in some engines now that reduce the kilowatt usage per hour and also reduce carbon emissions. There's some things being planned at Nielsen and some other plans that are taking place. So there's not a lot that we can do other than attack some of those utilities areas, because that's where 80% of our consumption is taking place, between utilities and as well as street lighting, which is under Duke Energy. So that being said, that's just a little background as to why the staff has a little bit different position about obtaining a consultant. Any questions?
Councilmember Clark, then Councilmember Monday.
I am not a big fan of studies, as you know, especially in housing, where I think we're on number 7 or whatever we're on now, 6. I did ask, and I was provided the Greensboro study. I've looked through most of it, but not all of it. I think they paid $250,000, $300,000 for this. I'll give you my copy for $20,000, let's say. Their city, very similar in size, shape, and color. A lot of good information in here. I didn't see anything particularly new for us other than buying carbon offsets, which I iffy about. But anyway, I would suggest, first off, I know we're getting ready to have some personnel changes in this area, that when the new folks are on board, look at them. But I have a bias for action, and I think we have 7 or 8 of these studies available to us from cities around us, and I would suggest we use those first. Second comment, I have concerns about analysis when the base case changes. One example, for the first time in my memory, and my memory goes back 22 years on this council, we are picking up the curbside residential recycling. Our trucks are. Started off originally, remember you had your green carts, you carry them out. That was still waste management picking those carts up, et cetera. My point being, we, being the city of Winston-Salem, are spending a lot more energy on gasoline or diesel, whatever those trucks run on, but it's not an addition. We're simply replacing others. How do you compensate for that in your base case? I'm not sure how you do that. Second one, and you mentioned this about utilities, this is the same thing true with Greensboro. Most of our energy use has to do with pumping water and sewer. To me, the challenge we have here is the biggest thing we can do, by far outdoes everything else we have no control over, and that is if Duke Energy was carbon-free. That would immediately cut our carbon footprint
in half,
60, 70%, whatever it may be. Then you wouldn't worry about changing the light bulbs out because they're carbon neutral to begin with. But we don't have any control over that. And I was particularly interested in reading the Greensboro study on what, and they really didn't have a whole lot of, well, none that I could put my hand on how do you significantly reduce your water usage. Some had to do with educating people, whatever, but still, we're pumping 35 million gallons of water a day up at hill. But anyway, it's a complicated area. I'm supportive of it. And my first comment is I'm biased for action. Bring me some things we can do, not spend more money on a study. I can get you 6 copies from Durham and everywhere else. They got some good ideas in them. Maybe we go plant 10,000 trees, whatever we need to do, but let's do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Councilman Monday.
Councilmember Clark, you've said that many times, and I just don't think anything has come to us from the sustainability staff. I'm going to support this resolution because I've been listening in on these committee meetings, and I've had separate conversations with the committee members, and they've given me all the reasons that it makes sense. Obviously, the staff did not support it. I was confused on a regular basis by the staff when they said that they were working so hard and they just couldn't do another thing, and I suggested bringing more resources in by creating new positions, and they immediately said, no, we don't need any more because we have a big staff. We do everything we need to do. So, I just couldn't make heads nor tails of what was going on there. If the consultant isn't the right answer, we still need to fix this problem because the staff, and when the staff has a completely opposite answer than the committee, they're not working well together. Is the energy specialist coming to those meetings?
Let me answer both of your questions. Actually, the staff just has a difference of opinion when it comes to using a consultant, but the staff is on board with moving forward to action. And no, the energy specialist does not attend those particular committees regularly. But I will say this, that he may be asked to come going forward in certain occasions when it is deemed necessary for a more productive committee meeting.
I'm just not sure all the information is flowing where it needs to flow. So that's all I had to say, Mr. Taylor. Thank you.
Councilmember Scipio.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, if we don't hire a consultant firm to conduct an energy audit, are you saying that we have the capability to do it internally and to create a roadmap that would lead us to achieving our goal of 50% renewable energy by 2030?
What I'm saying is if we don't hire a consultant, staff will be charged with providing a timeline. Granted, the big word here is resources. So we can prepare the timeline, but we also need to have the resources that will allow us to accomplish that goal.
Is the timeline the action steps?
The timeline and the action steps would coincide,
Oh, they're the
so they
same.
would work together.
So you're saying we have the capacity internally to create a plan?
We have the capacity internally. It's already been done as far as auditing our energy usage. We have recommended things in the past, but we have to have the resources in order to implement the action.
And your resources are dollars?
Absolutely.
And how much are you're talking about? Give us an idea of what we're thinking.
It would not be possible for me to give you an accurate amount just off of the cuff. Dollars is one of the resources, but there are other resources as well. So I won't put it all on dollars.
Okay. There's somebody coming.
I do have one comment.
Come on up,
Come
Mr.
on up.
Smith.
I will come up.
And if you'll say your name, if you'll just get to the mic and then talk to us, tell us your name, your title, position,
Yes.
or department you work in.
Yes, my name's Lindsay Smith. I'm in the Sustainability Department as the city's energy manager. And good afternoon, Mayor
Good
Pro
afternoon.
Tem, council members. I did want to mention specifically the city, and this is a good example. The city has secured a $190,000 grant that I believe was brought up to city council at some point. We have not gotten to the final stage, but it's a HUD grant to replace the remaining metal halide lighting that's in the fourth church parking deck, and we'll replace it with LEDs. That's $190,000 that will do about half of the deck. We have done roughly half the deck over the years, a little bit at a time, so this will allow us to finish it. But that gives you an idea of a large chunk of money that we'd be looking at for something like that. A specific building we've commented about internally in the past has been what's often known as the Lowry Street building that has all fluorescent lighting. It really needs all LED lighting. Same thing in the Stewart building. We do have some other facilities that are similar, but many of these facilities have also been constructed within the last 20 years. So they do not necessarily have old, inefficient lighting. It's just slightly. It's just a little more inefficient than LEDs. The fairgrounds is a good example of an area that has not had much money spent on lighting. The annex specifically, the education building, places like that. I don't have specific, well, I will mention the education building where we had Earth Day a few weeks ago. I was pointing out to somebody there are roughly 100 fixtures in there. It doesn't seem like many, but each one is $500 to $1,000 to replace. So pretty soon you've got, $500,000 to replace all of the lights in the education building. And that is what you get into with the larger facilities. There are grants that have been applied for, as was referenced earlier. We have not received those. Certainly that would be a benefit to receive grant funds. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Taylor or this item? Mr. Garrity.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee and council. I do want to point out that in the proposed budget that you will see coming forward, the capital part of the budget, I was just pulling it up here, we are recommending $500,000 of capital funds for green infrastructure improvements. It's a broad category. It could be used for lighting, solar, electric vehicle stations, lots of different things. But we're dialing that in. It's 2/3 bond money, so it would be every other year $500,000. So we're trying to make some conscious efforts to be intentional about providing Mr. Smith some funds to move forward with some of these ideas.
But Mr. Garrity, as we know, all of us, that you gotta have a strategy. But we have to have, just like what we did with capital projects and housing projects, we've got to nail it down to what 1 through 10 that we can get done in an expeditious manner, and what will be the bang for the buck.
Right.
Because we as the council, we could ultimately determine the amounts of monies that we want to allot to those initiatives and as to how quickly we want to get something done. Is that not correct?
That is correct. We need to bring you an entire list of all the projects, the return on investment, both in carbon footprint reduction as well as just the energy savings over time, and so that we can prioritize them with this committee.
And I'd also like to see, if possible, from staff, what other projects or initiatives could we do in those communities where we want to absolutely invest and be equitable? It's one thing for us to invest taxpayer money in our buildings and the infrastructures that they own, but what about in the neighborhoods that are struggling environmentally, sustainably, and equitably when it comes to the environment? Councilmember Larson.
I'm sure that the intentions of the Sustainability Committee and staff are right on target. My concern is measurable results in the time periods that we've established to try to accomplish the goals that we've set for ourselves. And what I'm not clear about is how we have measurable results to achieve those goals. I mean, we have a inventory of things that we think change light bulbs, change vehicles, do a variety of things, but I'm not clear about how that's going to actually get us to where we need to go, what percentage of our need is going to be met by the patchwork of things that have been suggested so far. I'd hope that a study that we conduct, if we have one, will give us the roadmap of percentages of achievable goals in a timetable that allow us to understand exactly we're going to meet the goals that we've established in this committee. So that would be the reason why I would support an additional study at this time, if I could have assurances that it was going to give us a clear timetable and schedule of percentages of what needs to be accomplished when to get us to that goal that we're shooting for in 2030 and 2050.
Councilmember McIntosh.
I think one of the frustrating things to the public and probably the members of council is that there's a lot of information floating around about reducing our carbon footprint. But the real savings come, as Councilmember Clark said, in a couple of small areas. And those are high dollar areas. And they're capital intensive improvements that we have to make. So if we really want to make a dent, then this council needs to talk about and have great discussion about how we get the funds to do those big capital intensive improvements. Nibbling around the edges is not going to make a big difference. I mean, we can all not use our plastic straw at the restaurant, but that doesn't make a difference, a significant difference that we all, I think, want to make. I think we're talking about how do we get there and what's the methodology for raising the money to allocate the kind of resources it's going to take. We have to get the buy-in from the general public, not just the folks who come to the meetings, but the public in general. We have to sell that idea because it's going to be expensive. Sure. And I think our next bond issue, which is probably a little further out than a lot of us want it to be, is one of the right places to do that, because I think the public needs to say it. We want to spend the money. Go ahead and raise my taxes to reduce carbon footprint. I think we'll get a good response from that, but I think that's a step that we have to take.
Councilmember Monday.
I agree with Councilmember McIntosh. To get that information, to lay it out, to know what all those big pieces are and how much it's going to cost and what the timeline is. Am I hearing you correctly, and Mr. Garrity, that we have the expertise on staff to lay out those plans, to how long it will take and what it will cost? And is there anything that we need from a consultant that staff cannot provide? Am I hearing you say that everything they can do, we can do internally?
We can manage an energy audit. There may be some elements that we may seek a consultant, but we can definitely manage an energy audit and begin to create a timeline and action plans to get there. Yes.
Councilmember Scipio.
And Mr. Taylor, just following up with your comment and Mr. Monday, and what kind of timetable would you be looking at if we said, yes, you can do the energy audit? When would we be able to have, as the council or the community, the big picture, the outline of these are the things we're needing to do, these are the costs, this is the timing?
Well, as Councilmember Clark said, there's some changes in staffing.
Right.
So I've definitely got to get that taken care of. Once that happens, I will be glad to come back before this committee with an information item explaining when you can expect to receive the information.
And that's great. But for number one in this resolution, if we wanted to vote in favor of doing something with a consultant, how much money are we looking at and what is their timetable?
That all depends, because we've got to create a scope. I know that depending on how intense the scope is, of course, that's going to impact the cost.
Mm-hmm. And that would be the same, you've got to wait for staff to get in place to be able to proceed with the consultant also, right?
We will have to have staff input, definitely, because of the nuances of our particular organization, some things that we know internally that someone outside the organization may not know. Yes.
You finished?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, I'm going to, Councilmember Larson, I really, if I adhere to Robert's rules, when you've spoken more than once or twice, even including me, but I'm the chair, that's enough. I want a personal privilege to allow Mr. Carter Berry to come up with the Sustainability Committee. Because I think, we're having this conversation, it's us, and then it's the people who are asking us to do this. Yeah. Come on up, would you give your name and your address, please?
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Carter Berry. I live at 431 Archer Road, and I'm the chair of the Climate and Energy Subcommittee of the Community Sustainability Committee. The points I want to make are, a lot of you are saying We may or may not have facilities on, or expertise on staff, but at the end of the day, 2.5 years ago, the city, you all passed a resolution saying, here is our goal, and 2.5 years later, there's no movement towards that goal. And so what we did as a committee was we went and said, well, what are all these other cities doing that are having more success than we are in this regard? And the things that we came up with are, sure, we could have brought to you tangible retrofits of your lights. We could have brought solar energy carbon offset projects. We could have brought you a lot of these different things. But what we understood was that we've done a good job of calculating the energy, and that's why that first supplemental document that Mr. Smith and the Sustainability Office have been able to put together over the last couple of years. They've done a great job of providing that information. But as Councilmember Scipio's comments have alluded to, there's still no plan. Yeah, there's bits and pieces. Maybe there's $500,000 in next year's budget. Maybe there's a proposed strategy to retrofit lights on a deck. But none of those things are going to get us there, like many of you have sort of alluded to. And what these companies do, not an energy audit committee, but a company that is a consulting firm that creates this roadmap, not over a year, budget by budget, but over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. What they do is they help you model what the future is going to look like within regards to our city. So it's way more complicated, or the projects that are proposed are more than what we're talking about. They're bringing to you the cutting edge ideas for how we might reduce our energy costs for water pumping. As Councilmember Clark mentioned, they're bringing to you ideas about how we might have carbon offset projects to help us get closer to that zero energy efficiency value. And so at the end of the day, again, the comparable cities in the additional information, Exhibit A, but also additional cities that we didn't put in there, what they have done is they, for the most part, have decided that it's somebody from the outside who's ready to go and come and do this is what should be done with the person who should be doing this, the group that should be doing this. And what they've done is they've tried to create a culture within within the city management infrastructure across departments to make sure that nothing sort of falls through the cracks ultimately when there's opportunities to make strides within the sustainability space. And so that's why we simplified this from what we brought to you for comment a few months ago to say these are the steps that are going to get us there, that are going to create the 5, 10, 20, 30-year plan that currently just doesn't exist. The other point I want to make is there's a concern, right, of personnel, of your 20% short staff within the city government. Because of mandatory requirements of corporations at this point, because of this being driven by large corporations, there are tons, and we put 3 examples in here. There are hundreds of companies that would bid on this, maybe not for this city, I don't know. There are hundreds of companies that do this work now. Undeniably, the RFP will take time. Replacing the sustainability manager will be part of that taking time potentially, but particularly within that power void, within that office, one less personnel, I think that this approach is going to allow us to keep progress moving forward in a way that it might stall out or be non-existent otherwise. So the last point I guess I want to make is about the comment about equity. There's about, again, grants are applied for, as we've heard from today, and often not funded, but there's $100 billion for this exact work from the Department of Energy right now. $40 billion of it earmarked for low-income or impoverished communities, specifically from that department. One of those, the people leading that charge, the Department of Energy, is literally going to be in our city on Wednesday as well, I should say. And so there's a lot of opportunity if we're seeking out the right sources of funds for this to potentially be partially sort of pieced through externally as well. Happy to answer any questions or whatever you need.
Thank you, Mr. Barry.
Sure.
I appreciate it. What is the pleasure of the committee? May I get some feedback? Councilmember Scipio, then Councilmember Clark, and Councilmember Mundy in quick fashion, please.
I think there are a lot of issues and things we need to be concerned about, and some information that, for me, I can't make a decision on moving forward with a consulting firm if I don't know what it's going to cost and the scope of it. And yet, I also respect that staff's ability to provide us with the information that we need also. So I would recommend keeping it in committee until we get more information on this. It's not a no, but it's let's get more information to make a better decision on the direction we should go.
I will get a hard copy of this to all the council.
I got it. I read it.
I left you, I had 2 copies.
I know you gave me one of yours.
I'll just reiterate, there are no magic bullets,
It's
and
not.
this study admits it. I think they claim one page they want to reduce it 2% or something. Folks, you can change that every bulb to LED, and every building we have, it will barely move the meter. We're pumping 35 million gallons of water uphill, downhill, sideways every day. Utilities use 80%. All the sewer stuff that they take out, it has to be heated with natural gas, burn off the moisture, and we make dry pellets out of it.
Okay.
Read the study. There are no magic bullets. If there were, everyone would have done them. Unless you're going to say you can only take 1 bath a week or whatever we're going to do. The secret is Duke Energy going to 0, and then our usage drops, our carbon footprint drops 70%. And stop gaps and whatever, I would love, Mr. Smith, you and I are going to meet, I would love to see the payback of changing the light bulbs in the education building. That's something we can do. Anyway.
Thank you. Councilmember Monday and Councilmember Sippy.
If hiring a consultant is what it's going to take to get these action steps to move forward, I'm in favor of that because we've been waiting for that for a long time and it just hasn't happened.
So what is the pleasure of the committee?
I think we should hold in committee till Mr. Taylor works his personnel issue. Because the person we really need the opinion of doesn't work here yet.
Is that a consensus? Do we need to vote on
I
that?
was going to say, if it's a consensus, that's fine.
It's consensus. Thank you. Next item, please. And I know that my sustainability committee people gonna hang us out to wash. I got it. We got it. I see you shaking your head. We know. We trying to figure this out, how we can throw all of us together. The main thing I got from the report was from the CARF and all of that and meeting with you guys. If we're not all on the same page, then we'll never get anywhere. And part of politics and engagement and asset-based and all of that is trying to get everybody to agree to something because this isn't Burger King. Everybody not gonna get what they want when they want it. So my advice to all of us, that's the council, that's staff, that's the committee, and all of us, and Mr. Taylor, somehow or another, we got to bring all of us together at some point, whether it's on a Zoom, a few of us, if it's just the committee, because we've got to get there. And we've got to figure out between now and the next couple of months, or as we know, till the end of the year, how are we going to get there? What are the things, the 5, 10 things we all can agree on that we're going to go do, that we're going to work on? And that means, as Ms. Councilmember McIntosh said, and I even told you guys that on the phone in the Zoom meeting, this is an expensive deal. And poor people cannot help fund this. If people going to have to give up something, again, it's not Burger King. The people with money that don't worry about carbon emissions and all of this, it's got to come from somewhere, and we got to be prepared to deal with the taxpayers who say, you know what, we didn't tell you all in a survey that was our number one issue. Our number one issue is housing and streets and sidewalks and crime. So we all got to navigate and wrap our heads around that one. And with that, thank you all for being here with us today. We'll see you at another point. Clerk, please call the next item.
Item G5, Youth Advisory Council Annual Report.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams and committee members.
Good afternoon, young people. Democracy at its best.
My name is Ava Banner, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council, and I'm joined this afternoon by our Secretary, Gufran Abd. The item that we are presenting with you this afternoon will be our annual report, which gives a detailed synopsis on our accomplishments endeavors, and involvement for this year. Thanks to the effort of city council members, especially Councilmember Scipio, and the city of Winston-Salem, we have been granted the ability to experience many different opportunities and create many different highlights. One of the most significant highlights of our year has been our annual project. The Youth Advisory Council set out to bring awareness to youth, especially school and gun violence. We did this by focusing our efforts on a PSA video that contained the interviews of our city and county leaders, for example, our mayor or our superintendent, but most importantly, the fellow students within the Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools. We also created miniature gift bags to hand out to the high schools represented within our youth council. While we have no qualitative data to enunciate the importance of this project, all of us have been able to gain the ability to develop our perspectives on the matter. We are able to reach out to our youth along with our community leaders in positions of power, and we're able to gauge the severity of the conflict we set out to tackle. In connection to our annual report, the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council was given the ability to help facilitate the Youth Trust Talks along with the Human Relations Department and the help of 4 commissioners. Throughout this trust talk, we were aiding in conversations relating to gun violence and safety within our communities and schools. The trust talks were open to anyone to attend, and many of our city and county leaders were there to provide their perspective on the matters discussed. Our PSA video, as I mentioned before, was also displayed for our attendees to see. The trust talks informed us on many different methods of assisting the community, especially how we can move forward to involve the youth and help their perspective be changed and help shine light on the issues that affect our youth directly. Throughout the entirety of our annual project and our trust talks, our conferences, we realized that one of the most critical ways to help developing the youth and solving pressing issues is to contact the youth affected. In order to help the youth, I have harped on this many times before, and I will continue to do it, we must speak to those directly affected by the crisis with the intention to act, not just to listen. Now, I'll turn over the microphone to our Secretary Gufran Abd, who will be discussing the conferences we attended and what we were able to gain from them.
Thank you, Ava. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams and committee members. My name is Gufran Abd, the Secretary of the Youth Advisory Council. I want to continue our discussion today into the topic of national, state, and general conferences that YAC frequents. Within these events, Winston-Salem's youth can meet and discuss issues and solutions with like-minded youth from other cities in North Carolina, or even nationwide. Most youth feel completely disempowered to even attempt to impact their community, but this is not how they should feel. These conferences solidified the vague ideas in our developing minds that there is no capacity to the influence we have as youth. On November 16, 2022, our Youth Advisory Council attended the National League of Cities in Kansas City, Missouri. We attended a myriad of workshops directed specifically to attending youth and general sessions in which we listened keenly to the most pressing issues that cities nationwide had to discuss. On March 11, 2023, the Council attended the National Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C., where we underwent similar activities, with 3 of our council members being in the planning committee for the youth workshops of the conference, with our own Ava Banner triumphing as youth mayor out of 300 possible youth. The final conference of that year that we attended was the North Carolina State Youth Conference, in which we were able to hone in on and explore more similar issues with youth councils from across the state, and where our very own Vice Chair Ava Banner was selected as Sergeant of Arms for the State Youth Council. For community systems to be representative, all parts of society must be included. When young people are distinguished or disengaged from community processes, a significant portion of the population has little or no voice or influence in decisions that affect group members' lives. This is changing. To make a difference in the longer term, it is essential that young people are engaged in formal community processes and have a say in formulating today and tomorrow's community. By being in attendance on a national, state, and general scale, by just showing up, the Winston-Salem Youth Advisory Council is creating a more active youth for our tomorrow. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the committee or the council? We just want to thank you. This has been, Winston-Salem has been a supporter of the Youth Advisory Council for a very long time, as well as the next advisory group that's coming up behind you. I know you had a good time in DC. I saw you. I was with you a minute or two, as well as in Concord. So again, thank you. Continue your learning, because this is life learning. And all it will do is help to enhance whatever path you choose to pursue in your life, okay? Thank you so much. City Clerk, please call the next item.
Item G6, College Advisory Board Annual Report to Council.
You're not Nathan.
You are indeed correct, Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Erica Simon. I am the Outreach Analyst for Human Relations, DEI, and a staff liaison.
Talking to Mike.
And the staff, I'm sorry, my voice is a little gone. The staff liaison for Youth Advisory Council and College Advisory Board. And I do just want to say that I have been working with these young people for about 2 months now, and I am extremely proud of them. And it has been an absolute pleasure being the liaison for these two councils. So Nathan could not be with us this evening. He is part of our College Advisory Board, and he is a student at Early College, which is at Forsyth Tech. So I am here to give this report for him. Thank you. Farmers Market Collaboration. The Winston-Salem Fairgrounds Market is partnering with the Winston-Salem State University in the initiative to ensure accessible and healthy food resources for their students. Students will use their Rams card system to purchase farmers market bucks for sale in the dining hall and or the bookstore. The students can decide how many bucks they want to purchase, and those can be deducted from the student's account through their ID card. The student can then take those farmers market bucks and spend them only at the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds Farmers Market on Sundays from 6 a.m. until noon. The farmers market bucks are accepted by all vendors in the farmers market. The Winston-Salem City Council adopted the ordinance amendment creating the Housing Justice Act on June 21st, 2022. The Housing Justice Act prohibits discrimination in residential housing transactions based on sources of income and criminal history. The act also sets affordability criteria for single and multifamily properties developed, built, renovated, or rehabilitated in whole or in part with city support. This act now is fully applicable to undergraduate or graduate college, university students who meet the criteria established by this act to reside off campus in privately owned, single or multifamily residential dwellings created using the funding criteria outlined in this act. Winston-Salem report on food security and housing accessibility among post-secondary student survey. Winston-Salem State University and the Winston-Salem College Advisory Board received a 2-year National League of Cities Communities of Practice grant. The grant was awarded to municipalities working jointly with post-secondary institutions to remove barriers to graduation for students attending post-secondary institutions. Food security and housing accessibility are two major concerns facing post-secondary students today. A study from 2019 conducted by Oxford and colleagues found that out of over 22,000 individuals from 22 post-secondary institutions, 44% qualified as food insecure and 52% qualified as housing insecure. I won't read the rest of these statistics, however, they are in your packet. But both data points, all data points make it clear that food insecurity and housing insecurity are substantial issues among students attending Winston-Salem State University. Recommendations to help alleviate barriers to affordable housing. Winston-Salem State University and the City of Winston-Salem should continue working together to ensure all students have access to affordable housing while they complete their degree. The Hope Center has resources available which could be helpful when creating a program to alleviate housing barriers. expand dining hours. Additionally, Winston-Salem State University could consider expanding their hours for on-site dining options. Expanding these hours would allow students to have more consistent access to meals through the university. Engaging students in the process of identifying potential strategies for addressing food and housing can help to ensure that their needs are met. And finally, having the input of students could help identify resources that they are more comfortable accessing, which can help remove barriers to housing accessibility and food access. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, we want to thank your department, Human Relations, for being the advisors to the groups. Again, I think that a lot of people dismiss the importance, again, of government and youth getting together. But it helps to, again, to create that path as to knowing what it is that you want to be passionate about, what's important to you, your community, your families. And the big part is being able to interact with others, your other peers, to glean ideas and opinions and things from each other. So I thank you for that. The grant that the city got from the National League of Cities in 20 and through 22, as many of you know, staff, I'll read something and then I send off an email. I read this, can we get this? That was one of the ones that I sought, and I communicated it to Mr. Garrity and staff, and they worked it out along with Winston-Salem State. Again, I don't think, again, when people think of accessible and affordable housing, they don't think about young people needing housing. And I'm not talking about people that are 21 and maybe have finished college. I'm talking about young people that have aged out of foster care, and young people that are homeless, and young people who just want to have a better quality of life. So anytime that the city can follow up on those types of grants and initiatives, we will continue to work to secure them for not just our city, but for our citizens that need it the most. Again, thank you so much. Next item, please, clerk.
Item G7, Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise Annual Report for fiscal year 2021 to 2022.
Ms. Westbrook, welcome.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee and council. My name is Jakira Westbrook. I am the Business Inclusion Manager for the Office of Business Inclusion and Advancement. Oh, there it goes, okay. And I will present to you all this afternoon the MWBE Annual Report for fiscal year 21-22. So just some highlights for the fiscal year. The purchase orders for goods and services placed with MWBE firms totaled $10.5 million. And this is the highest that it has been since we began tracking back in fiscal year 2014. 121 MWBE vendors registered with the city's vendor listing, electing to receive weekly email notifications from our office. And that brings the total to 577 MWBE vendors registered. We also provided technical assistance to 244 MWBE vendors. So that includes walking them through how to do business with the city and also becoming Hub certified with the state of North Carolina's Hub office. So I'll go into the spend. So there's 4 categories that we track MWBE spend. That includes construction and repair, subcontracting activity, procurement card spending, and goods and services. And I'll go into more detail in the upcoming slides. So the total spend for the fiscal year was $305.5 million, with $16.1 million being spent with MWBEs. Of that, $5.8 million was spent with MBEs, and $10.2 million was spent with WBEs. You do see a decrease as far as percentages, but the overall spend did increase from the previous fiscal year by $360,000, but it's just based on the overall total spend. So first is the subcontracting activity, and this accounts for all spend on formal projects for construction and repair. So that's projects that exceed $100,000 and were closed out during the fiscal year. So the total spend was $25.4 million, with $3.6 million being spent with MWBE firms, Of that, $1.7 million was spent with MBEs, and $1.8 million was spent with WBEs. Just one thing to point out here, a project could be awarded in one fiscal year, active in another, and then closed out in a separate fiscal year. And 8 of the 11 projects that were bid out during that fiscal year were during the early onset of the pandemic. So that's why you kind of see a decrease in the overall spend with MWBEs there. Next is procurement card spend, and this is for spend that is for purchases of $5,000 or less that don't go through the formal or informal bidding process. So the total spend was $3.6 million, with $175,000 being spent with MWBEs. Of that total, $41,000 was spent with MBEs, and $134,000 was spent with WBEs. And this is where city staff has a physical P card that they swipe to make emergency purchases or make discretionary spending purchases for their department needs. This is a $23,000 increase from over the previous fiscal year. Also for this type of spend, we encourage staff to utilize the online upcoming purchase opportunity form. So they will share their local bidding opportunities with us, and we'll send that out in our weekly newsletter that's sent to MWBE firms. Next is the construction repair orders. This is for construction repair projects for all active projects, for formal and informal projects. So for the fiscal year, the total spend dollars you see here is $151.9 million, with $1.8 million being spent with MWBEs, $1.1 million was spent with MBEs, and $671,000 was spent with WBEs. I will point out here, you do see a very high increase for the overall spend, but this is from the Nielsen Water Treatment Plant Modernization Project. So this is about a $107 million project. They have committed $4.9 million with MBEs and $3.1 million with WBEs, but that data won't be reflected until we close out the project. And then lastly is the purchase orders for goods and services, and this is for projects that exceed or purchases that exceed $5,000 in value. $124.3 million was spent total, with $10.5 million being spent with MWBEs. And this is the highest that the total has been since we began tracking back in 2014, with $2.9 million being spent with MBEs and $7.6 million being spent with WBEs. And this category is essentially like a catch-all category. It includes consultant services, vehicle purchases, and software purchases as well. Excuse me. Next, we'll move on to the disparity study implementation next steps. So we will begin implementing the B2G Now software. This is the diversity management system software. It will be key in monitoring and tracking key performance measures. It will also provide more accurate reporting for MWBE utilization, and we will also be able to collect and report spend by each department. So instead of relying on our wonderful purchasing department to provide data to us, we will have it at our fingertips.
Love it.
Next, we will also implement MWBE departmental liaisons. So this will be staff that has purchasing authority or staff that seek out bidders for discretionary spending. They will be in close contact with us to identify MWBE firms and also maintain outreach and bid records. And then lastly, we will mandate MWBE outreach for informal purchases. So that's purchases of $1,000 up to $19,999. And that $1,000 mark is basically the credit limit for most P card holders. Staff will coordinate with our division, again, to identify MWBE firms to help increase the likelihood of MWBE participation. So like the upcoming purchase opportunity form that I mentioned previously, that form will be the form that city staff uses. It's currently on the city's intranet site. They'll fill out all of the details and we'll do the distribution for them. So it'll be sent out to the 600 MWBE vendors that we have registered currently. And then lastly is the overview of the proposed implementation timeline. So Within the next fiscal year, we will begin implementing 3 of the recommendations from the study. So there's 9 recommendations total. So we will complete 4 out of the 9 within the next fiscal year. And the software that we were able to get will be a key piece in implementing and tracking the remaining recommendations from the disparity study. And then that's it. I'll take any questions if you have any.
I am thoroughly happy. It took us a while to get here, but I'm glad we finally got here. I always would tell Mr. Garrity, how do we know as a council, some of the policies that we vote on and approve. And when I got on the council, that is in 2009, when we moved to start changing our MWBE goals, the department, the process, how we communicate in the community, our relationship with Hub in Raleigh, and all of that. Because with a city with over 30-something thousand African Americans, and if you put minorities in it, it's over 50%. And they were not, somehow the numbers were just too low. And I know how important it is that we all relied back in the day on a piece of paper with some writing or email, but you cannot deny the technology that is available now for us to be able to track the dollars and who's buying what. And just a check and balance, like you said, Ms. Woodruff, your office, compliance, Mr. Scott's office, all of them. How do we know what we're voting on and what we promise is actually being done? Who is the person's following up, auditing and ensuring compliance? And what is the mechanisms that we're using to create all of this? Because if it so happens that someone says that we're not quite right on it, then we need to be able to go to that person down there, the legal department, and they can handle it. But I am very happy. I love the timeline. I love where we've been going with this. It took us a while to get here, but I can see some light at the end of the rainbow, because there's hardly ever a time I'm out in the community that minority businesses don't approach me or call me or email me. You know, I don't think we're being treated right. I didn't get the contract, and Mr. Clark, he does his best to help with that. But again, thank you so much. Any comments or questions? Councilmember Scipio, Councilmember Clark.
One thing you said that really is encouraging to me, that I think is essential, is hooking up between your division, keeping track, and purchasing, giving, making sure everybody knows who they can go to offer, to shop with, using those P cards. I think that if we haven't been doing that, and I suspect we haven't been encouraged, that's like the first line of encouragement. And so I'm really happy that that connection is going to take place, so that we'll start seeing a better representation of our investment throughout the community.
Yes,
Councilmember Clark.
Good report.
It is.
A number that I have always wanted and have never been able to get is what % of dollars, and I do dollars versus number of contracts, do we not get any bids on? I have sat in my living room and done it by hand, and I'll take a couple of months, but what I find is overwhelmingly, I would say 90+% of the dollars, there are no minority bids, even because there were no contractors or people chose not to bid. My best example I give is fire trucks. There's only 3 companies in the country that make fire trucks, and none of them are minority owned. But the point is, nobody makes fire trucks but 3 people. The other one is in software. We have a lot of software contracts. They're usually 6 figures, and they're not local. That always upsets me. Nor fire trucks. You got to go to California, get a fire truck or whatever. But I would be interested, and I hope your software will capture it, of what areas that we do not get any bids on, dollar-wise. Because what I'd also learned is there's certain areas that we get lots of minority bids on, but only one person can get it. So it would be helpful. And I'm not saying, I don't know the answer is, I'm not suggesting you go start a fire truck company or an ambulance company. But I do think every household buys slightly different groups of goods and services. And what we buy, there's only X number of people that make what we want. We buy a lot of gasoline. I don't know how we buy it. We must buy it by the tanker loads. We buy a lot of electricity. We just finished talking about that. We buy chemicals for the water purification plant, et cetera, et cetera. And what you find is there are no minority vendors. And for electricity, you have to buy it from Duke, by the way. But if anyway, as you develop this software, we can capture those areas where we do not get any bids to see if we're missing the boat there.
Yes, Councilmember Clark, if I do may add, a module in the software will allow us to collect who and who's not bidding, and also the reasons as to why they're not bidding.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
They're on top of it.
Will it also show that they bidded, but they didn't get the contract because they were too high?
Yes, ma'am.
It will also do that?
Yes. We will, currently, that data is done manually on the good faith effort, but we will be able to plug that data into the software and provide you with those reports if requested.
Just love it. I thank you so much, you and your team and everybody that worked on that. But again, we're looking forward to seeing your first report after everything. Like you said, the timeline is starting to roll. I think it'll be very enlightening to the community and to this council. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, council.
If there, yeah, we're going home now. Is there, he was the one asked. If there's no more business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.